at the end of with the recording. And so this session is the first technical segment for the Asia Pacific Regional Ministers Conference this year. And as you would know, there are 5 different concurrent sessions going on now. This is the third session, just in case if you are orienting yourself where you are. This is digital transformation in education session. And as we all know now, by now, with going through the COVID-19 situation and everything, nowadays we cannot really talk about education without digital, right? And it gave us so much lessons, so much things to do going through COVID-19 pandemic. Starting with the availability of digital learning, remote learning, also with some concerns about digital addictions and some fake news and all those things. That's very short-term kind of insights that we have to look at. But in the long term, what kind of things that digital transformation in other sectors will bring into our sector in education is another big concern. So I think today's session will exactly talk about 2 things, I think, for our overall goal of the regional conference, which is first the short-term learning recovery through digital education, digital transformation. The second part is the long-term digital transformation that will contribute to transforming the education for next decade or century. So this is very important session, although other sessions are also very important. The objective of this session is to explore the current trends of Asia Pacific, how the digital transformation has been done. The second objective is we have a beautiful, very influential panels from this room and then also from virtual, who will share lessons and good practices and how to support this inclusive digital transformation for everyone. The third part is debate on advocacy and regional relevance of those initiatives. The output from this particular session are twofold. So one is our discussion today, this session will be shared through our repertoire from UNESCO and UNICEF. Yes, Joyce and also Rachel. So they will be taking a serious note, everything that we are talking about. And then they will consolidate and summarize in the plenary session right after the session before the lunch. So that's one output that we will share. The second output will be for tomorrow's high-level session where Royal Highness the Princess will be preside. We will share also the output from this session as a consolidation of all 10 sessions that we are doing today and then present to the high-level meeting. So those are the 2 important outputs that we are looking at. And I will introduce now our panelists. We have 2 panelists from this room and then another 2 panelists from virtual. So the segment of this session will have 2 different segments. So the first segment, actually 3 segments, I'm sorry, 3 segments. The first segment will be Mr. Tuan Deng from UNESCO Bangkok will present the overall regional trend of digital transformation. The second segment will have 4 panelists, 2 from here, 2 from virtual, sharing their best practices, their thoughts and insights on their own digital transformation in their own context, from CSO, from government, from private sector, and so on and so forth. The last segment is where the excitement is. So the last segment will be open discussion to everyone here. we'll have some very lively discussion moderated by Mr. Peter from UNICEF. From UNICEF to moderate the open discussion session, and then try to have an agreement on what we are going to present at the plenary session as well as the high-level session tomorrow. So far, any questions? Great.
You didn't introduce yourself.
Oh, I didn't introduce myself. Sorry. Oh, I was excited. Okay, my name is Jong-hee Park. I'm very happy to be back here in my region, and also very happy to be back with UNESCO and the UNICEF colleagues, as well as the delegates from Thailand, from Maldives, from Vietnam, who I worked with before, and I'm very, very happy to see everyone here. I'm the head of Innovation and Education Program at the United Nations University Institute of the Institute of the Advanced Study of the Sustainability, based in Tokyo, in Japan. And I'm responsible for how digital transformation innovation can be used for different kinds of education, including climate change education and sustainability education. So thank you very much for pointing out. Are you happy with my introduction now? Okay, so let me introduce the panelists now. Right, we have Mr. Tom Kay from Virtual. He's the Global Engagement Lead at the EdTech Hub in Australia, based in Australia. And he's the international education specialist who has been working in different organizations like UNICEF and EdTech Hub and World Bank and so on and so forth. And he's been experienced in Africa and Asia and Middle East. He will bring the insights today on the digital divide, especially how the digital divides were felt in the field when he was implementing different projects in different parts of the world. The second panelist is Mr. Samir Kumar Paul, who is here with us. And he is the youth leader in Jago Foundation. Jago Foundation, if you are familiar with or not familiar, the Jago Foundation has been awarded so many times by UNESCO and other organizations on their innovative technological practices for education for grassroots initiatives. As the youth leader today, Mr. Kumar will introduce how youth are actually leading and how they are really feeling this basically giving us a feedback from the youth leaders' perspective, how the digital transformation is implemented on the field, but things that are not working, that are not working from the youth perspective. The next is Professor Luan Vinh from Vietnam, the Director General of the Vietnam Institute of Educational Services from the government of Vietnam. We welcome Professor Vinh. And Professor Vinh has been very influential in his government, and especially for the teacher education and implementing policy on the ground and developing the policy for Vietnamese context in terms of the technology. And today he will be sharing with us particularly how the COVID-19 situation affected the national education in Vietnam and what was challenged, how they evolved. The last panelist is from our online panel, Ms. Oyuna Predoch, Director General of Education Integrated Policy and Implementation Department of Ministry of Education of Mongolia. Thank you for joining, Ms. Oyuna. And she has been very experienced policymaker in Mongolia. And she's today going to share with us how the national policy of ICT in education as a whole, not just for the COVID-19, as a whole, has been affected the education in the whole country of Mongolia. And Mongolia, by the way, is a very interesting country with very high potential for education, for technology, because it's a vast land with scattered population. So it has great potential of implementing this remote learning using technology. So that's why particularly we invited the Mongolian case here, and we will be happy to hear from her insights, how the national policy is implemented in Mongolia. So as you can hear, we have really rich panel from different countries, different fields, and different sectors. I'm very excited to moderate this session. So before we start our discussion session, let me first invite Mr. Kwan Leng, the Program Officer, UNESCO Bangkok IT and Education Team, who will give us a brief introduction or presentation of the regional trends of ICT and education or digital transformation in Asia Pacific.
All right, thank you, Jungwee, and good morning to all the participants who are joining us in person and online. It's an honor for me to start off this morning by presenting the regional findings as well as the recommendations on digital transformation in education. And as Jungwee has mentioned, it's a topic that has become much more relevant and pertinent since COVID-19 pandemic. Before I start though, I would like to thank the Learning Education 2030 Technical Working Group, which this session and this report were developed in partnership with, particularly UNESCO, UNICEF, ITU, and EdTech Hub. Sorry, it might be the range. Okay, here we go. So a quick overview of what I will be covering in my presentation today. I'll start by reflecting on why it is important that we talk about digital transformation and explain what do we mean by digital transformation in education within the context of this paper and this session. Then I will share the key issues and challenges facing the Asia Pacific region within the digital transformation. Next, propose the priority areas on how we can support digital transformation within the learning recovery in the short and immediate term, as well as transforming education systems in the medium and long term. And then lastly, share the proposed policy pointers, which we will discuss in part 3. So as we all know, COVID-19 has significantly disrupted education systems over the last 2.5 years. And many of these impacts will have effects on learners and stakeholders all over the world for years to come. Within our region, it is important to recognize that there was already a learning crisis before the COVID crisis. For example, almost 50 million of the world's out-of-school population is in our region. And furthermore, many students are failing to achieve the basic proficiency levels in skills such as reading. At the same time, disparities for marginalized groups continue to grow within a vast range of factors, such as gender, ethnicity, language, geography, socioeconomic status. On the other hand, COVID has also highlighted the importance of technology in supporting education. When within remote and online forms of education were the only ways to reach students during the school closures and lockdowns. This is something that we will all need to consider for future resilience of education systems. As well, investments and implementation continue in this area, and it's important to highlight how it will support the continuing access of quality education in times of disruption, as well as for enabling transformative ways of learning. So digital transformation can be quite ambiguous, a quite ambiguous term. So it's important to identify what do we mean by digital transformation. Within this context, digital transformation is about the use of the possibilities of digital technology to transform learning experiences through curriculum, pedagogy, and educational practices, both inside and outside the classroom. It is also about enabling a shift for teachers and students to interact in learning in new ways, moving from traditional approaches towards more collaborative and learner-centered learning. And lastly, it's about mainstreaming of technologies throughout the education system. So not just about teaching and learning, but also about how we manage education, how we improve the organizational capacity through use of digital tools. So there are 8 key issues that have been identified that prevent us from achieving the promises of digital transformation in the Asia Pacific. These can be broadly grouped into 4 categories. First, the quality and inclusiveness of digital learning, the mechanisms and capacities to govern and monitor digital transformation initiatives, the various risks and negative consequences that must be mitigated as the use of technology expands in education, and then lastly, the resources to support this digital transformation. I'll go into this in a bit more detail in the next few slides. So there are a wide variety of enabling factors for ensuring inclusive and quality digital learning. Some of the main ones are devices, connectivity, parental learning support, relevant skills for both teachers and students, and learning resources. However, these factors are not readily available for many students, especially for marginalized and disadvantaged populations. This has led to the implementation of previous ICT initiatives and those that were rapidly implemented during COVID not having the impact that we were hoping for. For example, only 28% of students were effectively reached through these alternative modalities during the COVID-19. Meanwhile, not all teachers have had the opportunity to support and to develop their relevant skills to support digital and blended learning. In countries such as Kyrgyzstan, Malaysia, and Philippines, fewer than 5% of teachers reported having the basic ICT skills, let alone the best pedagogical skills to effectively use ICT in teaching. Next, for governance and monitoring. The existing ICT and digital learning policies have been identified as a key enabler for digital transformation. And yet there's still contrast between the readiness of countries in our region. For example, when comparing high income and low to lower middle income countries, while 50% of the higher income countries have an operational ICT and education policy, only 27% of the lower and lower middle income countries do. Secondly, the quality assurance of education and ICT interventions is limited due to the lack of capacity and tools to monitor student learning and ICT intervention. Thus, there's the ability to make improvements based on tight feedback loops and reliable data is less clear. We must also be cognizant of the risks of the expanded use of technologies in education. For example, in general, there is an increasing trend of children spending more time online, and digital learning obviously contributes to increasing this amount, and therefore increasing the exposure to various cyber risks, issues with safety and security, as well as privacy. Furthermore, during COVID-19, there were reports about students experiencing increased mental health issues and a sense of isolation that was linked to learning remotely. From the system side, governments are faced with the challenges of balancing how they partner with private sector and technology companies to facilitate digital learning. While partnerships with the private sector is critical to support things such as innovation, mobilization of resources, governments must also consider issues regarding the ownership of data, how digital tools are inclusive of all students, as well as how they might become reliant on these proprietary technologies. And lastly, on resources, before the pandemic, there was already existing challenges for financing education, which the financing gaps are predicted to increase in two-thirds of low and lower middle income countries going forward. According to UNICEF, almost $200 billion is needed in additional annual funding to universalize digital learning. This includes infrastructure, devices, learning content, upskilling of teachers, building policies and institutional capacity, and supporting the data to implement digital learning. So now we come to the priority action areas. In alignment with the themes and objectives of this conference, we focus on two things: the short-term immediate actions to support learning recovery, and the medium to long-term to support transformation of education systems. In the learning recovery, the focus should be on supporting students to recover from learning losses. There is an opportunity to leverage digital technologies to provide tailored education and sustained support to help students to recover from their learning losses. Here it is also urgent to expand access to quality digital and blended learning, which complements and expands school-based learning. And at the same time, we also need to ensure that we build the foundations for digital transformation. Then in the medium long term for transforming education systems, we should focus on maximizing the potentials of technology to accelerate progress towards the SDGs and deeper transformation of education systems. This should be guided by three core principles: centering on the most marginalized so that we can ensure that all students are able to benefit from digital learning, creating high quality contents and resources that lead to transformed educational experiences, and moving education to digital spaces through pedagogical innovation and change. I'll go into detail on the policy pointers now. So please read these very carefully because during part 3, we'll be having the open discussion to review the policy pointers that have been proposed as well as the language and wording. So in these 4 priority action areas, we propose to provide targeted support for teachers to make use of blended and digital learning and how digital technologies can support them to tailor their teaching to different students. Then to develop and adapt learning content so that they are accessible and contextualized to the needs of learners, particularly marginalized students. Next, continuing to invest and build partnerships to ensure meaningful connectivity and devices for all students and teachers. And then lastly, supporting and engaging families and communities so that they can support the shift to blended and digital learning. Next, for transforming education and its system. Here we have 5 priority policy pointers. First is on pedagogical innovation, leveraging digital technologies to adapt and develop relevant resources through appropriate curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment for blended and digital learning, providing capacity building for all education personnel, including teachers, teacher educators, school leaders, and this should be guided by relevant frameworks and standards. Third, to develop coherent policies that can coordinate actions across governments and ministries, as well as guide how they work with various stakeholders. Fourth, to invest in capacity development for monitoring systems such as MS and LMS to strengthen the capacity to track ICT-related implementation and student learning, which should also be able to be disaggregated by a proven practice. And then lastly, digital citizenship education, looking at how students can be safe online, but also how can they use digital technologies for learning and for more meaningful use of technologies in society. So that's it for my presentation, and I'll pass it back to Renee.
Thank you very much, Tuan, for the great presentation. It gives us a very succinct overview of how our education sector has been coping with the COVID-19 situation with technology, and then what would be the next steps in the long term to transform our education with technology. So that's really a great overview. Now we are turning to the second segment of the session. So instead of me standing there alone, I will just join with our panelists and sitting here and then moderate the session. So we have 4 panelists as I introduced just before. And without further ado, let's start the discussion already. Great. So Mr. Tom Kay, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, John Wee. Can you hear me?
Yes, clearly, Tom. Thank you very much for joining from Australia. Are you in Australia now?
I'm currently in Melbourne. Yes, I'm back here with my family where I'm from. I'm normally based in Nairobi in Kenya.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining. So let's start with a short-term, immediate responses that we did for the COVID-19 situation with the digital technology. So you have been doing a lot of different different projects and activities in different parts of the world. And what do you think is the major obstacles that we need to overcome to remove these digital divides in education in Asia Pacific, particularly?
Thanks, John Wee. That's a really good question, and it's one that many governments around the world are battling with. Before I jump into an answer, I just want to say very quickly, thank you so much for the invitation to attend virtually. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you in person. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you all. So as I think about this, I guess I first want to highlight a broader but very important point. That is that no single child engages with an education system in the same way. And that now, more than ever, when we have access to data and granular insights, it's a time when we need to begin to think about education with more nuance and how we deliver education. I make this comment, John Wee, as you asked me about my thoughts on the Asia Pacific more broadly, but I would argue that we need to think that maybe at a more detailed level than the region or even country. We need to use our data better to understand the unique challenges that different groups of children are experiencing, and then design programs that meet the needs of these various different children where they are. A lot of people will say that that's really difficult. It's nearly impossible to design programs that meet the needs of every student. And frankly, I agree. It's a really tough job, but it's the serious and very important responsibility that has been placed upon all of us as education leaders. So given the difficulties in doing this, what should we do? My thinking is that we focus on the similarities, and what we're seeing these days is that there's actually more commonalities between students in, say, Bangkok or Jakarta with those in Nairobi or Melbourne than those in the more rural and regional areas of the countries in which each of us live and work. And so by understanding the types of challenges children in similar contexts, but maybe in other countries experience, we can learn more from the experience of policymakers around the world. Now, there are some common challenges that cover many countries. And I think it's with this kind of gathering, it's often useful to leave with very specific guidance. So let me speak specifically about 4 different challenges or missteps that are fairly common that we're seeing globally. The first of those is that programs are often designed to reach the most easy to reach learners. So instead of designing programs for the urban school-going children who are already in the schools, I think what we really need to focus on with digital transformation is addressing the most marginalized learners first. Otherwise, that digital divide will continue to grow larger and larger. And I think addressing this challenge really includes the use of multiple types of technology that are already available to those students. It also includes building capacity of teachers and administrators who are working with the marginalised groups, and building the capacity of parents to support learning. That's a really important one that I'll come back to. A second thing that we're finding is that there's really quite often an absence of stakeholder engagement in the design and rollout of digital education programs. Too often, when designing these programs, we don't think about the constellation of key actors that surround students. I think we all know now that teacher quality is the most important input into student learning. But I urge policymakers to think even more holistically than this. There's so many different actors that must all be working together to ensure that students have access to high quality learning opportunities. School leaders need to work closely with inspectors, public administrators to ensure that schools are aligning with policies. Teachers must work closely with coaches, parents, and their training providers to ensure that they can deliver high quality, student-centered learning that meets the students' needs. Investing in and building the capacity of all of these actors is really important for digital initiatives. The third common misstep speaks to the point that Tyann mentioned earlier about the scarce resources. We've noticed that when governments pursue digital initiatives, education officials are often spending a lot of what are very modest budgets on technology and digital schools rather than the core educational services. I'm regularly seeing MOEs funding large-scale connectivity or device programs. Now, these are really, really expensive and require the setup of new teams and to go into areas that ministries of education are not normally familiar with. So instead of undertaking these programs internally within the MOE, I suggest that officials should create partnerships with other ministries, such as planning or telecommunications, who might be better positioned to afford and deliver the programs. Then the last thing that I want to highlight before I pass over is that often during the pursuit of digital education, we lose focus on what we already know about providing high quality educational services. While it's tempting to get rid of the new digital age, we need to make sure we're using the new technology to amplify the good practices that we know already work. So we want to use technology to build teacher and stakeholder capacity, ensure the availability of lots of high quality curriculum aligned content, and make sure that we have robust M&E processes and many more things that we already know work. So we already know a lot about education. Let's not forget all of that good stuff we know during this exciting time. Back to you, John Wei.
Thank you very much, Tom. That was a great intervention. We learned a lot about these digital devices, how those can be actually intervened and addressed by different types of modalities that you just presented. For example, the program should be designed for the most marginalized children, not just children, and also the holistic way of budgeting our capacity buildings in the policy and so on and so forth. So now we will invite Mr. Samir Paul, Mr. Kumar, and he's, so you actually have been working with the youth, right? And as you yourself youth leader, so you have been implementing a lot of digital technology projects and activities. So from your perspective and from the youth perspective, what has been working and what has not been working and why do you think so?
Hello, good morning, everyone. So this is Samir Kumar Pal. I'm the volunteer at Jago Foundation. So Jago Foundation has two programs basically. One is education program, digital education program, and another is youth development program. So I have been volunteering there since 2014. And in these 8 years, I have come across some experiences that I think might be useful for you. So as you know, I have come from a developing country, and in a developing country like Bangladesh, a vast number of parents doesn't have the minimum knowledge of technology to support their children, or they're busy earning money. So they have little to less capacity to invest in their child education. So everything comes upon the teachers. Okay. But in the rural areas, they do not have the access of technology. You know, that they do not have the access of technology. So it is creating a gap between the urban and rural students. Jago Digital School uses a blended learning approach since 2007 to connect the rural students. There are central So there are central teachers who are teaching from the headquarters, and there are digital classroom. There is a big screen like this, and students are sitting like in front of that, and there are classroom facilitators who are helping in classwork or engaging students. So this is the way Jago has been teaching since 2007. Now, Jago Digital School is also teaching the surfers in Cox's Bazar who cannot afford to education because they have to earn for their families. Besides that, for this initiative, as our moderator said, that Jago also got UNESCO prize back in 2016 for their digital education. Now, I want to share 3 learnings that I have that what is working and what doesn't work. So number 1, purely digital experiences where students are expected to self-learn and guide their own learning process doesn't work simply because if the teacher or infrastructure doesn't allow, it is not possible for the students to stay motivated, you know, or to, there is no collaboration, there is no fun in education. So without the teachers, it is being very difficult. When I asked the students, they said it is not fun, it is boring. They don't go to school for learning only. They go for friends, they go for having fun. So this is one of the reasons. Another thing, when I communicated with the education coordinator, I said that he said that the students are not interested. When they were using digital platforms or multimedia, students were more engaging. For example, in English language class, when they used digital contents of pronunciation, the students were very much interested in learning. Or maybe an animation was shown, that person was more interested in mathematics. So these are the reason. Second lesson is quality content and learning design needs to be adequately adapted and developed in the context of learners. So Jago is working with marginalized students that are across the country, and the students are basically the children of rickshaw pullers who are day laborers, like that. And Jago is providing free of cost digital education. But in our country context, for marginalized and disabled students, there needs to be much more than this digital education because there are language barriers. They are not getting support from their parents. Apart from that, there requires special curriculum for the disabled students, right? Marginalized students. So this is another issue. Another thing is learning environments. In times of COVID, we cannot expect every student can have the same learning environments because their parents might have some issues going due to financial or economic. Maybe all family members are living in one room. So it is not possible for any children to have one laptop and just learn. So this is creating a divide. So what Jago is doing in this case, it is using blended learning approach. For example, the class coordinator is engaging them in various activities, and there are main central teachers who are teaching from the capital city. Apart from that, during COVID-19, the teachers recorded class and sent to their WhatsApp. Those who have WhatsApp, and those who doesn't have digital device or smartphone, teachers used to call them and teach them the education. So that is one thing. Lastly, a strong support system is needed to ensure that digital learning is effective and engaging for learners. So what do I mean by support system? The thing is, lack of socializing creates a mental pressure for the students. While learning a critical problem, students cannot learn alone or guide through their own. So in that case, Jago uses platforms like Discord and other where there is a peer community who is helping them to understand their lectures. After that, Jago also uses debates, organizes debates using these platforms so that not only the students are learning only the curriculum thing, but it is also helping them to develop the soft skills. Also, there are other things that can be done using augmented reality, which can be used for learning alphabets. there can be virtual realities, there can be competition in virtual realities. Since I'm a mixed background of computer science and development studies, so I find this as tremendous opportunity if we more invest on technologies like augmented reality and virtual realities. So that is all. And if you have any specific questions in the next round, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar, for the great intervention again. Thank you. Yeah, self-learning in online mode doesn't work. So that was really a big statement, and I cannot agree more, actually. Teaching in an environment, online environment is also learning from a lot of Zoom meetings and everything. Yeah, we are moving to now Vietnam, and also from the government perspective now. We would like to learn from you, Professor Vin, the key lessons that you have learned as a government officials from the Ministry of Education, your experiences in implementing this immediate responses using different remote learning and everything to the school closure and everything at the COVID-19 situation.
Thank you, Jongi. And I would like to share about the Vietnam experience during the COVID. And I can say, we can divide into two periods. For 1.5 years, Vietnam followed the zero COVID policy. And in the second school year, we follow the new normal approach. And the reason for doing that is because, we have to go for the vaccine first, and then we can reopen the school. It is very, what I can say, kind of a little bit slow reaction. We don't aim, to approach on the new normal, from very beginning. And with that approach, we can keep, the number of the case very low at the beginning, and we still can keep the school quite safe for the student during the first year. During the first year, it's range between different city and city. Most of the school across the country have to be closed from maybe 2 months to 4 months. But for the second years, when we open up the new normal approach, some of the province, the students have to stay for almost 1 school year. And during that, many different approach has been implemented, from the televisions for the disadvantaged area, or we can do the online learning across the country, and so on. So I would like to give 2, good lesson and 3 challenges, that we have learned. The first good lesson is a good preparation really works. The reason I want to mention about that is because we approved the new curriculum in in 2018, and at that time we have been prepared for the new reforms. So we have 2 big projects. One project is about the National Education Information System, that we try to have the information for each student at all level, even from the preschool, general education, and higher education. And that system really worked, during the COVID-19, when we want to collect the information from the student, even at, each student. So for example, like we want to know, who don't have the device, who having the trouble for education, we can get that information, reach every student and every teachers. It is really work. The second project that also work is about the teacher training programs. I remember also in Bangkok in another conference back to 2018, when I present about this time we want to do all of the teachers training online. Many participants, feel skeptical because they don't believe that, the teacher training can be done for nationwide online. And thanks to the system, actually, when we approved the new curriculum in 2018, and then starting from 2020, I can say that all of the teacher training has been done online, even for the new textbook, for the new curriculums. We can say whether it's effective or not, but it works somehow, and the student and the teachers are prepared for that. So the first key lesson I want to say is the good preparation really works. We don't expect the COVID-19 happens, but we prepare for the new curriculums. And at that time, we think, we need to move for the digital transform. So we did it that way, and it's really work. The second good lesson is about the good can-do attitudes from everyone. So we can say that, all of the teachers are very committed. And in Vietnam's education system, we are the top-down level system. So for example, in the first year, when the COVID happened, the school had to close. The government very quick response. They decide that we need to do it on the television. So 25 broadcast has joined the games. And then we can recruit the teacher across the country. They join the television. They can contribute to provide a very good lesson and sharing through the 28 broadcast networks. And the teachers, besides providing the online learning, by through Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams, they even do the family visits for the students who are have the limited access to the internet and so on. And I can say, during the last 2 years, everyone learned the new skill. The teacher learned the new skill, the school manager learned the new skill, the student learned the new skill as well. Everyone learned the new skill. And it is very positive compared to what happened. We talk about the digital transform 10 years ago, but it doesn't work that way. In some province, we invest a lot of money. We provide, the smart classroom, but no one using it. But now, we don't need a smart classroom, right? Everyone still can do something. But there are some very big challenges. The first challenge I want to say is the gap. Other panelists mentioned about the gap already. It is a big gap. Recently, we have done a nationwide surveys, and the information is 70% of the students are using mobile device for the online learning. It is not online learning if you use the mobile device, right? 70% of the students using the mobile device. And I cannot agree with you more about many families. They have 2 kids, 3 kids, but they have only 1 device, the same room, cannot study at the same time, and so on. Very difficult. And in Vietnam context, the government initiate a project calling the device and the network for you, and we provide that. For the student. The second difficulty is about the resistance to change. Now we're back to the new normal. The teacher feels the release, right? They may quickly forget the skill that they picked up in the last 2 years. They say, okay, now we can go back to the offline class. We don't need to use, what I have learned. It is also something we need to mention. The third one is about the policy guidance, which is also very difficult. During the last 2 years, we have issued many decrees. For example, like we allow for the online trainings, and then we realize that what about the online assessment? The student can go and can study, but how can we assess them when they go back to the school? And things change gradually, slowly and slowly. And we hope to see, whether it can be sustainable or scalable at the second period. Okay, so I think I have to stop now. First round.
Thank you very much for your great intervention again. So we can learn that political commitment, also the will pushing forward, is really, really important, and the good preparation really make everything possible in Vietnam's context. It's really great to hear. Now we are moving to Mongolia. Ms. Oyuna is joining us online. And now we can move actually to something more long-term transformation of the education system. So Ms. Oyuna, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Thank you very much for joining.
you.
Could you share with us the models or approaches that Mongolia has followed for enabling digital transformation in the context of Mongolia through different policies? Rather than focusing on the COVID-19 situation, probably in the long term, how this policy, education, ICT and education master plan and policies actually implemented through the different parts of the country. Could you please give us some insights on that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be one of the panelists and share the Mongolian experience we have been going through. And as you mentioned, that digital transformation is the policy we have been pursuing quite years. And it has embedded in the country policy. For example, in the Vision 2050, Mongolia is the country's long-term development policy for social transformation. This vision has 9 pillar strategies, and one of them is human capital development. And the human capital development highlights that the education shall be student-centered, inclusive, and aligned with the lifelong learning opportunity, and be available through open education system. It also specifically sets the goal to digitalize teaching and learning, monitoring and evaluation in other dimensions of education by 2050. As this policy promotes the digital transformation in the country, there is a certainly need to have an integrated policy and plan supported by the both soft and hard infrastructure to facilitate the digital transformation in Mongolia, and also the inaugural strengthening of the human capacity on digital literacy in Mongolia. And also it's going to help us to introduce and disseminate the new paradigm in the education system. Well, with the aim of this such policy, and the Ministry of Education and Science has recently developed ICT in Education Master Plan. So this master plan is going to be very strategic document to sustainably implement the digital transformation in the sector. So it's going to cover all levels of the sectors from the pre-primary throughout the higher education and including lifelong learning. And also, we have been working on the ICT competency standards for teachers because we think it's very essential to realize, to implement the master plan effectively and more successfully. During the development of the master plan, we have conducted the policy review, which thoroughly reviewed the progress of ICT in education and identified the key challenges and the gaps, and also compared international experiences and best practices to learn from. Well, this kind of the policy documents, the master plan, provided us the opportunity, strategic planning of ICT in education initiatives for the shorter term, the learning recovery, but the longer term, the achievement of the Vision 2050, which emphasizes the transformation in the society. Well, in the past, until maybe in the 2016, 17, and the ICT projects in Mongolia usually were intervention-based, but with the master plan, with this master plan, we are able to more strategically align with the rest of the government initiatives. Now, for example, I would like to share some of the experiences or some of the examples what we are going through under this policy. And as you may have heard, especially the UNESCO knows very well that the Ministry of Education have developed and approved the Education Sector Medium-Term Development Plan 2030. It's a 10-year plan. And this plan emphasizes digital transformation a lot, especially in the teaching and learning, management system, digital evaluation, and all these open education systems, open schools. We have emphasized many aspects of the digital transformation in the plan. And this plan precisely emphasizes the digital content and learning material development and to promote inclusive, equal education and also lifelong learning opportunities for all. You know, in the digital transformation really scales the inclusiveness of the education. And one of the key actions is to develop the digital content, and we call it midle.mn. This is the very the effective and good quality platform. And also we have developed some learning platforms for schools, teachers, and students. But the interesting thing is that this kind of the digital transformation was planned even before the pandemic. So the pandemic really pushed ahead the development of these digital content and learning platforms. And the Ministry of Education Science has developed a kind of dedicated platform because under the Ministry of Education, there is a education information and the technology center. So this center plays the key role for the digital transformation in the country. And also Ministry of Education encouraged school teachers, school educators and the private sector and the IT developers to develop this digital content and learning materials. But this content and digital materials need to meet the certain the requirements set by the Ministry of Education, just to ensure the quality of the content, digital content and learning resources. And after this development, we have realized that this is really helpful, especially for children and youths out of the schools because of the certain reasons like the development, disability, and those from the poor economic, socioeconomic background, and those residing in the remote area, and also those the children who considered as at risk of lagging behind in the learning achievement. So it really included some of the children who were behind the schooling and education system.
Ms. Oyuna, I think on that point, actually, I have a second question related to what you were just saying about this inclusive provision of technology to different needs of the children and learners. So could you please give us some kind of concrete examples of how Mongolia at the national level provided more inclusive provision? It can be content, it can be technology itself, it can be teacher training for inclusive learning. Could you give us an example how Mongolia at the national level provided an inclusive digital technology for learning?
Well, the inclusiveness, this is about the engaging the children out of the schools and beyond the school education. So inclusiveness, so my point is from the children's perspective. So, and this digital content is open, and also we have developed the simultaneous platform developed by the private sector. And also these two platforms are free and open for anyone who would like to access. Because, and also we work with the private companies and the phone operation companies, and there are three largest private companies in Mongolia that operate the phone service. And they allowed all children, all teachers, all the youths to access the digital content and learning resources free of charge. No mobile data was charged when they access the digital content. And this digital content promoted through the public, through the big media, and the children, and some of the children even provided by the iPad. For example, then some donors helped us to provide some digital tools to the children who can't access the digital the content and learning material. So this was one of the initiative, the action we took. And the second one is and also through the media, we also promoted a lot of the content and lessons. And so it was very accessible to the children, especially who don't have the digital tools. And one of the achievement we have achieved, and at the end of this, the promotion of the digital content and learning material is that some of the children, even the nowadays, they push their teachers to teach the same quality lesson as it presented in the digital content and the media lessons. So this is one of the very good motivating point for the education system to achieve the quality aspect of the services.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oyuna, for the great insight. Actually, I cannot agree with you more on the notes that the inclusive technology, especially for education for the most marginalized learners, cannot be achieved without private sectors actually collaboration with the education sector, because there should be some kind of innovative mechanism to provide these digital devices and also contents to the children without any cost. So that was very good intervention. And we are actually seamlessly moving to the second round of the panel discussion. And thank you, Ms. Oyuna, for the second part of the questions. We are quite over timing at the moment, so let's have a 2-minute intervention for each question now. I will move backward that we did for the first round. Now I will ask Professor Vin. So can you give us some example of what types of learning technologies actually give the Vietnamese education the biggest impact so far? And how do you think you can scale up those kind of great impactful technology? Thank you.
So thank you for that. So as I mentioned in my previous intervention, when the teachers at the beginning, you see, I mean, when the crisis happened, the teachers mostly they moved from the offline to the online mode. They're just using the Zoom, Teams, or whatever, just to keep the connection with the student. But it very soon, I mean, realize that it doesn't work. I mean, as we hope, as we expect, the student are kind of, I mean, they can follow that in the first semester or even later than that. But in the second year, all of the observation is the student losing the interest if the teachers keep the same way, especially for the higher level. For example, at the university level, it's very difficult to, I mean, keep the student engaged on that, even turn on the camera to follow, I mean, the lesson. And we can see a bit very clearly that, I mean, the teacher changed, especially for the lower level, at the primary level, lower secondary level, the teacher, they really change the way they deliver the contents. They are very innovative. They learn from each other. They're learning from the PD programs across the countries. And they are very quite innovative on, I mean, changing the way to deliver the content to keep the student engaged. And one of the projects that we are quite successful is called the Connecting School. It is just a common platform created by the Ministry of Education and Training, and where the teachers and the company can provide, I mean, the content and sharing for everyone to use. And it has been linked to the government network, where it is bigger initiated by the government, where we can share all of the contents. I remember when we talking about that, I mean, many people inquiry whether it should be a common platform for the whole country, but it doesn't work for them in Vietnam case. And I don't believe that it may work for other countries as well. It will be very difficult to have, I mean, a single platform, such case. It will be very diverse, and we need to get the involvement from the private company as well. The PPP collaboration should be, I mean, the key point for the digital transform. But maybe the solution is we need to provide the basics for everyone, and the advanced can be, I mean, for, I mean, the one who can afford for that. Yeah, and I just want to share one example that is quite successful.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Bin, again. So moving on to the third panelist, Mr. Kumar. So this blended learning actually has been new to many rural children and learners, probably. So what are the skills do you think they need to make best out of this blended learning? And how do you support developing those skills?
So in my view, there can be 5 important skills that our learners can have to enjoy the full benefits of digital learning. First one is basic computer skills, which includes how to join class, how to upload assignments in maybe Google Classroom, or how to send emails. So it might be easier for a lot of students, but for rural students who are maybe Bangladesh is also suffering with waterlogging due to climate change and all, think about those children, how they can have those basic computer skills. So if they have those skills, it will be helpful. Second is online communication skill and etiquettes. For example, when we see there are school forums and groups, there are processes how to communicate, how to ask questions, when someone is asking question, whom to ask questions. So these are some skills. Also, sometimes in online platforms, you have to communicate in such a manner, otherwise other person might get offended. So these are some online communications etiquettes that can run. Number 3 is time management and adaptability skill. I'm trying to focus on blended learning, not just purely digital learning. So for blended learning approach, we need both the in-person class and the digital class or online class. So for that, time management is important and adaptability is also important. 4 is media and information literacy. Not every students know where to find information, how to browse, where can they find more. If they don't understand from this class, where they can learn more. So these sort of information literacy they need to have. Lastly, and I think this is one of the most important that we might forget, that is mindfulness and awareness to make use of technology. In these tough times, it is very important to keep the focus. So maybe our curriculum is teaching us a lot of things, except that mindfulness, how to keep focus on the setting and how to not get distracted, because there are a lot of things in the digital world. And government can help this through through collecting data from young people who are working in this, to collaborating with youth organization in preparing policy, to prepare youth task force. And also I think there are some things that government can do, that is invest in technologies like AR and VR. Then they can have research on best practices that are available in the Asia Pacific region, and they can encourage hackathons to encourage young technical students to actually come up with innovative solutions that can foster digital education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumar. So now we are moving on to the last question, to the last panelist of the segment 1, the first segment of the panel discussion. Tom, are you still there?
Absolutely, John Wei.
Thank you for waiting. So we want to ask you like questions that are related to your first intervention about the digital divide, right? So so what would be the power of digital transformation that we could use to actually address this digital divide? Digital divide coming from digital transformation, but then we should use digital transformation, I think, to address the digital divide. So how do you see we can use digital transformation to tackle this digital divide? And some examples, if you could give us. Thank you.
No problem at all, John Wei. Thank you. Let me start very specifically this time. One of the tools that I'm most excited about when it comes to digital technology and its use in education is digital personalized learning, or DPL. When I refer to DPL, I'm talking about tools that deliver content to students in a way that meets each student at what we call their proximal level of learning. That's delivering content that is just at their outer limits of knowledge to push them that little bit further. DPL tools are able to do this as they collect data on every student interaction with the application. So they know the kinds of areas that a child has mastered, what they're having difficulties in, and where they are most suited to progress to next. And in my mind, this is one of the most exciting types of tools that could have a great impact on education as they're refined over time. We're not there yet. These are still being developed and evolved and refined, but I think they're really, really exciting. And it also represents the idea of making sure that we are using digital transformation to enhance practices we already know work well. We see that through teaching at the right level and student-centered pedagogy. Now, if we step back from that a little bit, the example of DPL tools highlights two different things that must be focused on if we want to leverage the power of digital tools to support education transformation. First, content. The most important need that I've observed is the development of a full suite of curriculum-aligned content. Many public and private content providers make content for different grades or subjects or modalities like TV or radio, and in different languages. What we really need is to make sure that we have a whole set of content that covers all grades, all subjects, in all languages, that is available across all of the different modalities we use for learning: radio, TV, computer, and more. And then we can use this interchangeably to support digital learning both within the classroom and without. Second, and I want to deliberately finish on this note, we must invest in the people. Teachers require training to properly implement tech-enabled learning approaches, both integrating it within the classroom and externally. Ministry officials need to better understand things like Web 2.0 or even Web 3.0 before they can design policies that properly leverage technology to its full potential. We also need to focus on enhancing child safety, preventing cyberbullying, and protecting our children's data. Many significant investments, and here I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, have failed to drive increases in learning. This is because they don't adequately consider the humans in the system and what they need to be able to make the most of these investments in technology. So while I think we should absolutely get excited by the potential of technology to support learning, I'll finish by saying, please, please, please never lose sight of the human element. Back to you, John Wei.
Thank you very much, Tom. Yes, that's really a great note to finish this panel discussion session, to emphasize the importance of human capital and the human resources. We were going to have a Q&A session at the end of this panel before we move on to the second segment or the last segment of the open discussion, but we are quite running out of time. So I will just integrate our Q&A session into the open discussion so you can have more discussions with our panelists here. I just want to give like 3 key points that I took as key messages from this session. It was very fantastic, amazing to hear from the Mongolian case that the integrated policy of ICT into the national plan actually made everything very smooth and effective, and it helped us to shift from intervention-based technology into more holistically integrated technology for learning into the national plan. Together with the Vietnam's case, I think Vietnam's well preparation at the government level really helped the government to combat the school closure and also prevent the learning disruption. The second part is there are a lot of innovation going on, as you heard from all these 4 panelists from different parts of the world. And the private sector's role is really, really important. Unfortunately, I don't really see the private sector in this room, but we should invite private sector, all these IT companies to be part of this discussion. Oh, you're here. Thank you. You're from? Huawei. Okay, thank you very much for being here. Yes, more like Huawei, we want to see how we can actually work with private sector to make this technology more inclusive. The third note, as Tom said, computers are not a magic, but teachers are. So we have to invest on teachers, and we have to invest on more holistic way of developing skills of teachers and teachers for students as well, learners. So with that, I would like to close this first segment of the panel discussion, and I will hand it over to Mr. Peter Dubry for the second part of the open discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks to all the panel speakers and their insights. It's really good to hear this kind of insights from this perspective, but it's also really critical that we hear from you, participants here and also participants online. We have just less than half an hour left because we are in a very remote area in this hotel. So we had the longest distance to go back to the center of the so we will have to close 2 minutes before 12. The idea is to bring up the proposed points from the policy pointers for A, learning recovery, and then B, transforming education. So Tom, can you put them up in the slide? So it's really important to hear from you, from your experience and your context, because we also hear context. It's really critical. And then we have, when you think about the kind of reflection that you want to make, think about relevance. What are we seeing in terms of being proposed? Is it relevant? Is it feasible for implementation? What are the enabling factors to make this happen? Think about capacity building, financing, etc. But especially also, are there any gaps or issues you would like to bring up to strengthen the set of proposed priority? So this is in a nutshell the introduction to the open discussion. And please, when you want to make an intervention, keep it concise. Introduce yourself very briefly, your name and where you work. And then we take it forward from there. So I just want to open it up for everybody to provide their reflections on what we have seen from the presenters, but also from the proposed policy pointers that are now reflected here on the screen. Yeah, I'll just go from there.
สวัสดีค่ะ I'm Kamalrat from People Open University Thailand. I agree with some summary of that, but from my direct experience in alternative education in Thailand, I think that the lacking part is the policy. The policy that is very weak, especially in Thailand, my country. So the first one is policy. The second one is the pedagogy. The third one is the PPP, like Mr. Win said. I would like to reflect the real situation in Thailand now. We are in the long time we focus on formal education, informal education, but right now the current situation in Thailand is alternative education. People are laid off, people no job, and then people jump to alternative education for their to earn a living. So they just study whatever that is their life can go on. So meaning that they are very expert. You just imagine on the street of the traffic in Thailand, we have more than register 100,000 of rider, food delivery man, no education, low education. They're saying that I want to study law, I want to study IT because I have to do the navigator to my customer. I want to study the insurance. I want to study languages because I have the foreign customer. This is what I need. So people university, can you provide this kind of education to me? But my policy says, no, that is not in the academy. So meaning that people need to learn. So first earn a living first, and then please count it into the education. Count it. So make it, move it into the e-credit bank. So the merging seamless or the formal, informal, and alternative education together, make it flexi. Make a platform, make a portal, make a friendly digital transformation. Everyone can have a check. Hey, my credit saving is like this. I want to go further because right now I have money to eat. Then that's it. And then I want to go more. Kind of that. So what exactly needs is curriculum is no problem. Everything is no problem. Just only policy, PPP, and the kinds of the friendly platform. That's kind of that. I think that is come from policy. So what I need is the innovative and practical and friendly pedagogy. Yes, from People University Thailand.
Thank you so much. Clearly, there's need for this alternative approaches, flexi ways, and so on, and focusing on employability as well.
Thank you. I'm June Zhang. Actually, I'm from Huawei. I'm the Vice President in charge of public relations. Actually, I have been working in Asia Pacific for 16 years. And fortunately, I even worked in Vietnam and Bangladesh. My previous position was CEO of Bangladesh. So today, actually, I also want to share some of my views. In fact, in my view, from technical wise, in the past several years, not only several years, in the past years, the divide in the countries is getting even bigger. Especially when we have a lot of new technology, VR, 5G coming, we see in different countries, the gap is getting bigger. Even in one country, in cities and rural areas, the divide is getting bigger. So this is a very big challenge for everybody. This is the first thing. Secondly, even in one country, in different schools, the readiness of smart education is very different. In some schools, they have everything equipped, but in some schools, they don't have anything. And even some of the schools, they have facilities, but they cannot communicate with each other because they have their own brand, they develop by themselves, they purchase some equipment from some different company. So even the interface is a challenge. So the coordination is really difficult. This is the second part. The third challenge is that we talk about content. But content-wise, we see, at least they mentioned, we're short of many contents. Meanwhile, some content has high quality, but some content quality is poor. So that's the third challenge. So from my company and from my view, I have some suggestions. The first suggestion is that to have a master plan of facility infrastructure is really important. And then the one who needs to take this responsibility is government. And particularly, it should be Ministry of Education. They should have a master plan for 5 years, 10 years. This is key. And not only, this is not only a responsibility of the Ministry of Education. It's related with a lot of departments because they need enough budget. They need to set the standard. They need to make sure this is one network of the country, not only for some part of the schools. So this is the first one, to have a master plan with all aspects from government side. Second suggestion is that public and private cooperation, coordination is really important, especially when we talk about the content. We all know that a lot of companies and a lot of departments are developing contents, but who is controlling what you need to develop? What's the standard? What is the quality? I think this cooperation should be there, and the government needs to control that, to check and to audit. This is my second suggestion. Thirdly, not only when we talk about education, it's mostly about school education, but like this lady mentioned, not only about that. We need a vocational education. We need some education for adults. So, for example, all about this, in some countries, we did something together with government. For example, in Bangladesh, we had a digital bus to offer ICT training for rural areas, especially for those girls. And then we also have Asian Academy in Huawei, especially like in Indonesia, in Thailand, in Malaysia, we have Asian Academy offer trainings because we are ICT company. So mostly we offer ICT training for those people, for all people, for government employees, for officials, for those unemployed, for students, for everybody. Everybody should have the possibility, have the right to access to this kind of training. And thirdly, I can give an example. In Bangladesh, I know that ICT division is planning for 10,000 digital labs all over the country to offer training for all people. So I think this is a very great initiative from government side. So I hope with the joint efforts from private sector and the government sector, especially when we set a master plan, then we can carry out together. Then we can do it better. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. It's actually a different way of transforming education for all. That's what you mentioned, and the digital divide is really good.
And hello, good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for a great discussion. I'd like to make just a two quick intervention to improve probably some of this segment of the cover research and second point. For the teacher support, I totally agree with the practice, the innovative modality of teaching and learning is everywhere during this pandemic, particularly. So what I want to really emphasize here is the importance of the solid digital platform the teacher can use and collaborate. So I think for the teacher support, the first segment, if we could also include the collaborative learning, among teachers by utilizing those digital platforms. And I actually would like to congratulate Ms. Olina of the Mongolian representative because in the last 1.5 years, I worked with Mongolian teachers a lot, but they have done a brilliant job for training teachers all online. Okay, so and they didn't stop the teacher training when they couldn't actually meet in person. So for the last almost 2 years, every single teacher training was done online. Okay, and this digital platform for the vaccine schedule, the teacher development platform was very, very useful. Teachers can upload their teaching content, download, actually utilize and discuss it. And it was fully supported by the government, but also by the higher educational institution professionals. So it was really the collaborative, the engagement of all levels of education, and importantly, those uploading the very quality content was connected to the promoting the teachers, the students. Okay, so that was very innovative and also motivating the factor. And second intervention, short learning content. I really want to see both teaching and learning content. Okay, because in the teacher support, it's government support, private sector support. But for the second, the content, I think both teaching and learning content are important. Okay, so if we want to have a bit more discussion, and we didn't discuss much about farming and community support, so that's something we need to continue discussing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Clearly, also the support system is really critical, and we also had the example from Vietnam about teachers training, which I think actually provides an opportunity because of the digitalization. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm from Maldives. I work in the Ministry of Education as policy planning. My question, the meaningful connectivity, actually, it's really important. But well, one thing I heard is the DG, Mr. Vinay, said mobile using and is not really, I mean, learning takes place, but for disadvantaged or remote areas, it's and the cost of providing the devices for disadvantage. Sometimes we use these devices. So what do you mean by using the mobile devices not take learning takes place? And Miss Uyana from she said about having it was very good description, very similar for us, the Maldives. It's also very dispersed population we do have, and the connectivity also had been a very big issue for us during the close downs of the schools. And maybe Maldives has been one of the countries in the region who start open the schools fast. So we have teachers, about 90% trained in digital learning, and about 50% of our teachers are already certified Google teaching. So, but still the connectivity and this getting into, the pedagogy issue is still there. And reaching out is the issue, and the devices is the main issue. And since Mr. Win has said using mobile devices is not really, learning takes place. So how would you define mobile devices? Is it just mobile phones, or the tablets they provided, or how it is define it? Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great to have this kind of reality from the ground, kind of feedback from the Maldives. Can you move there?
Thank you very much. Bernie Lovegrove from the Australian Coalition for Education Development. Just to say, it's been very pleasing to hear a general consensus of the need to focus on those who are missing out, the importance of the inclusion, and priority to the marginalized, those who don't have access to very much technology at all. And so one point is that in the enthusiasm for promoting and extending access to digital learning, that those who are without still need face-to-face contact with either minimal technology or very low technology, and that government budgets and priorities need to focus on them. Secondly, it was very pleasing to hear our colleague from Wahai mention the point that it's important that governments retain control when it comes to public-private partnerships, and that it's important that governments gain the internal capacity to negotiate well with the private sector, so that it's in the interests of the government and the people of a country, because it's the right to education of all those people, and they need to be careful about the cost of negotiating deals, whether it's hardware or software, that it's to the benefit of the people of each country. Thank you.
Yeah, we're here.
There's a hand online. Can we let that person go first?
Can we go?
Mr. Chin Chang Wei, please unmute and turn.
Yes, Chair, thank you. China think the digital transformation is a very important opportunity for us to achieve the SDG 4. And if we want to promote the digital transformation, the government should play a pivotal role, and all of the stakeholders and partners should be involve it. And several things we need to pay much attention. First of all, is the infrastructure. We need to make the internet can access to all. That's very important. In China, we have all of the schools have connected to internet. And the second thing is the development and the sharing of public quality education resources. We can make all of the quality resources can be shared by all. In China, we have established the smart education platform, cover the basic education, TVET, and higher education, include 250 curricula, and cover the teacher training. So everyone can sharing the quality, the online quality education resources freely. And the third thing is the supporting policy system. We should have the policy to encourage the development of the education resources online. And we should encourage the applying of new technology in education. And we should have the policy to facilitate the vulnerable people and the marginalized people can benefit from the digital transformation. That's very important, because the government can provide the fund aid and provide the device to those people to make them can access to the online resources education. The third thing is the policy on the ensuring the security of the data and ensuring the ethnic utilizing of the new technology. The fourth thing is the teachers training. It's very important because if we want every student can benefit from the digital technology, the teacher is the key. The teacher should be training on the new technology applying in education. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Some very important points. And also we hear again about teachers being really at the core of things, the need to support teachers. Yes, please.
Hello, esteemed panel, distinguished guests present here and online. My name is Sitin Doji. I'm from the Ministry of Education, Bhutan. And it's an honor to have this opportunity to share a little experience from what we did at Bhutan. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we knew that the vulnerable students were getting more vulnerable, and we had a lot to deal with. So what we did was, the first thing we did was we tried to employ all forms of, tried to use all forms of digital learning, such as Google Classrooms, emails, and the sort. And to those that didn't have access to such devices, we tried to reach them through national television. And right now, we even have created a new channel dedicated to learning. And to those that we couldn't reach through television, we had developed self-instructional materials, which were printed out books designed so that students can learn specific topics and concepts by themselves with the help of parents and those that they are with. And we supplemented that with radio lessons through radio. So these were all programs which were part of a package of education in emergency programs. So the message I want to share is that though we are pushing so much towards digital transformation, until we find a sustainable solution, I urge everyone to use whatever means necessary to deliver education. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Again, the focus on the most marginalized and the need to have a blended approach in terms of making this transition work.
Thank you very much. My name is Ananta Duryapad, the director of the UNESCO Institute in New Delhi. I want to focus my intervention on the medium and long term. I think there's been a lot said on the short term. The notion of context was brought up quite a bit, but I also think that we should pay equal attention to learner agency. The reason is that context sometimes can get into a vicious cycle of adaptive preferences, which does not allow agency to be exercised. In a sense that if a student is somewhere in rural India, for example, would have access and the choice to make from a curriculum which might be shared in the United States or so forth. So it's a global good, which is what I think the Futures Education from UNESCO talks about education as a global social good. And I think digital education provides this opportunity for the first time in a sense of a platform. Although I would like to throw this question to the panelists because there was a mention of a common platform. And I think one platform would be a bit difficult, but in a sense of exchanging information among different platforms. And therefore, this comes into this partnership. But I want to think more broadly, I would say more ambitious in a sense of a global platform, a global body, something like ICANN, where it's a multi-stakeholder group, which becomes like part of the UN entity. So a multi-stakeholder group that is governed by something like the IPCC or something which the UN kind of takes over in terms of managing this, what I would call the global commons. This is where the knowledge base is. And then the role of artificial intelligence. I haven't heard AI in this whole discussion, and AI is going to be there, and especially for education. And if we do it well, the holy grail of education in terms of personalized education becomes a reality for the first time. So a lot of complex issues to be discussed, but I think it has to be broader than just a PPP. I think you have to bring in many of the at the international level NGOs who are working in education, like Education International and many others, the Education Endowment Fund, among many others. So if we are going into the global summit, which the Secretary General has called for, and if we are looking for something as an outcome, I hope that we start discussing of a global platform with a global commons under the guidance of the multilateral governance structures.
Thanks so much. Global goods, AI, absolutely. I think I can have only one more question, and then we have to summarize and then wrap up. Oh, two. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I'm Professor Shafiul Azam. I'm the Director, Planning and Development, Ministry of Education, Bangladesh. It's really a pleasure to have all these insights. And I was really interested when one of my fellow colleague, NGO colleague, Mr. Kumar was reflecting our experiences, and another colleague was also referring to our 10,000 ICT lab where we are going to take intervention for teacher training. Honestly speaking, from the government side, I would also like to share, because with the presentation slide, it was referring to some learning recovery approaches, where I have seen the teacher support, policy support, and family support, and all these. I will come back to that a bit later, but just to start with a story that in our country, the digital transformation journey started with our Honorable Prime Minister's Vision 2021, the Digital Bangladesh, and that's way back 2009. The reason I'm sharing this experience, that since then we have started taking different policies. Even ICT in education policy has been taken, and it has been mainstreamed with our overall development plan. And based on that, we started establishing a multimedia classroom, as our friend from Indonesia was sharing, and started training our teachers. But unfortunately, one of the things that the resistance that always comes, that people are resistant to change. I mean, from a face-to-face modality, they were not very habituated to do this. COVID-19, it's a misfortune, but sometimes we say that this misfortune gives you, brings up some opportunities. Honestly speaking, that COVID-19 has made some big shake, a paradigm shift, and a real change in our country. Just after the school closure, within 70 days, we have started TV, online classes, and all these. But all these were possible because we started the journey long ago, started giving them training. They had some skills already with them. And now they realize that this is the reality that we have to use to go to a transformed world. Often it is misconceived that digital transformation is aligned with the COVID-19, but in our country, we do not think so. So what we did, we used high tech, low tech, even no tech, just to address, not that I am transforming to only high tech and I'm excluding no tech. No, this will go parallelly. I mean, the face-to-face will stay, even those digital transformation. As our director from UNESCO New Delhi was mentioning, AI, we are also targeting the future education, keeping in mind the fourth industrial revolution. Now I'd like to conclude where what we have done, our recent intervention. We have taken a master plan, blended education master plan. A national blended education task force has been formed in our country under the leadership of our education minister, Dr. Dipumoni. And you will be happy that she will be joining with us today. And from the house, it came up that we need collaboration, not only from the education, but from other partners who are associated. So we have got Minister for Planning, Minister for Telecommunication, Minister for Finance, and all those in that committee. I mean, 7 ministries are included in that. All the secretaries are the member of that. So in that master plan, we have formed a framework, and in that framework, we have covered 5 key areas. Number 1, teaching learning process. Number 2, teaching learning content, as it was mentioned. Number 3, teacher development, because it is the teacher who will deal with the teaching learning process as well as the content. Number 4, another which did not come up in the discussion, maybe if I have not missed, the assessment. Since we are going for a change, I mean, we are talking about the personalized education. I mean, teacher-student-centric education to self-learning education system. So there will be a change in the assessment system also. So we have covered that assessment. And finally, the infrastructure, inclusive infrastructure, so that we have a parallel structure, the face-to-face as well as the blended, so that the students can have their materials online, as someone was discussing. The content which will be readily available for TV, online, offline, and every media it will be available. Those sort of content should be there. And teachers should have a new imagined role. Everything have to have a new role. Earlier, he was just a teacher. Now he will have to have the facilitating role. Teach the students how they will reach those contents. So these are the 5 things we have engulfed under our blended education master plan. And it has got 3 enabling factors: policy, management, and finally the collaboration. So all these engulf the blended education master plan, which has been taken in Bangladesh, will advance. Even one of our panelists, Mr. Tom Kayo, this time we are not only working from the local level, we are also trying to get stories from different world, experiences from different world, evidences from the world, so that we can enrich day by day our system. Thank you very much. Maybe I have taken a lot of time. Just I could not resist the temptation to share that blended education master plan thing of Bangladesh. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. And it's actually great to hear your story from Bangladesh, and really summarizes all the big points that we've been discussing earlier in this session. I'm sorry, I really have to add like 1 second.
Hello everyone. My name is Ulambek, Deputy Minister of Education, Kyrgyz Republic. Several years we tried to improve IT environment at school, but during pandemic we saw real situation, and I found that the real situation is the same as in each country. And so under the UNESCO support, we developed the qualification requirements for teachers on using IT. And now we are working to prepare methodological documents, how to teach, how to use some programs, specific programs, how to communicate with families, with how to find community support. And I agree that we can't say about digitalization when we have only 1 computer in 1 class. So we try to work with World Bank, and this year 1,200 schools will equipped by computers, and we try to made internetization of all schools, but some problems is many schools have internet, but they don't know how to use it, because time go fast, and we try to think about it, and we try to learn more about digitalization from other countries. And now we have project distance education for improving quality and access project. And I'm glad to invite you as an expert to Kyrgyz Republic, and we would like to take part in some international exchange programs for teachers, how to use IT. Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. And I'm not going to summarize this beautiful session. Such a lot of rich content, and I think it really overall confirms the overall kind of priority actions, but it really enriches also the quality of thinking about the big issue. So I would like to thank you very much. You can clap for yourself. And I think we have to get our bags and move to the grand ballroom, which is like, as I said, like we are remote. We have to go back to the urban center. Thank you very much.